pound for pound, he's one of the best rebounders of all time, and one of the greatest defenders. Actually, he's just one of the greatest players. Period. So why do you never hear about him? A 6'4" guard who played like he was 6'10" with his post play. Sidney Moncrief built his name over an incredible 4-year career with the Arkansas Razorbacks, helping the program become a basketball powerhouse. Then went on to play a decade with the Milwaukee Bucks, becoming a franchise legend. Yet while Moncrief was one of the league's top players in his prime, he was also one of its quietest and most humble. Whether he was dropping 30 or shutting down the opposing team's top player, it was all business. And while he played on one of the best teams of the 1980s, the Celtics or the Sixers were always in their way. Then at the height of his career, his knees gave out, and the end came quickly. So while circumstance and misfortune has led to Sidney Moncrief becoming overlooked, the first ever DPOY was one of the most complete players to ever touch the court. Let's jog your memory. Hailing from Little Rock, Arkansas, Sidney Moncrief developed his all-or-nothing attitude due to his mother's expectations, learning early that there was no excuse not to do things and do them right. A teenage Moncrief would attend Hall High School, where as a senior he would be named a state all-star after averaging over 19 points per game on very efficient shooting, while also leading the 4A conference in rebounding at over 14 per game. And luckily for friends and family, they wouldn't have to go far to see Moncrief continue his basketball career, as he announced his commitment to the University of Arkansas as soon as the national signing period opened. Little did Arkansas know, over the next 4 years, Moncrief would play a massive role in the program becoming a basketball powerhouse. But it wasn't just Moncrief, as in the same season he arrived on campus, so did a junior college transfer named Ron Brewer. And with a sophomore forward named Marvin Delph making huge strides in year 2, the Razorbacks now had their trio of the future, who would eventually become known as the Triplets. Brewer could hit the big shot and soar through the air, often on a breakaway that he had started with a steal. Then there was the sweet shooting, high-scoring Delph, who would have put up even more prolific scoring numbers had there been a three-point line. And finally Moncrief, a workhorse on both sides of the ball who never took a play off and scored at an incredibly efficient rate, with his ability to get high percentage shots whenever he wanted, as he played much bigger than he was, and routinely led the Razorbacks in rebounding, even though he was just 6'4". And Moncrief's suffocating, relentless defense was perfect for Coach Eddie Sutton's game plan. As a freshman, Moncrief led the team in rebounding while shooting over 66% from the field, and Arkansas put together their best season in decades. But the following year was when Moncrief and the Razorbacks truly became great. After a loss to Memphis early in the 77 season, the Razorbacks would run the table, winning their final 17 games to finish the regular season at 22-1, as Moncrief upped his scoring, yet still shot about 65%, while again leading the team in rebounding. And with Arkansas going undefeated in conference play, they took home the Southwest Conference regular season championship, then beat Houston for the conference tourney championship. But they were stunned in the first round of the NCAA tournament after a huge second-half comeback from Wake Forest. So the Hogs were on a redemption mission in 78, once again running through the regular season on the back of their trio, while completely shutting down teams with a defense that was nothing short of dominant, as they suffered just 2 losses en route to another regular season conference championship, but would lose to Houston in the conference tourney. And Moncrief continued seeing his scoring rise, while maintaining incredible efficiency and remaining the team's leading rebounder. But the NCAA tournament is what Arkansas was waiting for, as they ran through Weber State in round 1, then survived a stacked UCLA team in the Sweet 16, as Moncrief finished with 21-11. Arkansas relied on their defense in the Elite 8 versus Cal State Fullerton, holding the Titans to 40% shooting in another win, but they would fall in the Final Four to eventual national champion Kentucky, as Moncrief finished with 13 points. And while it wasn't what they were hoping for, they would get the last-second win over Notre Dame in the national third-place game, as Moncrief finished with 10 points. But with Delph and Brewer graduating, it was Moncrief's team as a senior in 79, and the team wouldn't really miss a beat, with Moncrief putting together an All-American season as a top 2 scorer and rebounder in the conference, However, he would also experience the beginning of what would eventually become chronic knee issues. But for now, it was nothing to worry about. And while Arkansas did a little more losing than last year, they still recorded their third straight 20-win season, while earning a share of the regular season conference championship after a Moncrief game winner in the season finale, and would then beat Texas by a score of 39-38 to win the conference tourney championship. Then after a 19-point game in a first-round win over Weber State, and a 27-point 12-rebound performance in the Sweet 16 versus Louisville, the Hogs were in the Elite Eight, set to take on the Indiana State Sycamores and their star Larry Bird. And while Moncrief and Bird had a memorable duel, with Moncrief dropping 24 to Bird's 31, a last-second Sycamore shot would end the Razorback season, and in turn, Moncrief's college career. So Moncrief's time as a Hog had exceeded expectations, with Moncrief leaving Arkansas as the school's all-time leading scorer, with a career shooting average over 60%. And even more impressively, the 6'4" guard also left as the program's all-time leading rebounder. And heading into the 1979 NBA draft, he was looked at as one of the most complete prospects in recent memory. So Moncrief was off the board quickly, being selected 5th overall by the Milwaukee Bucks. But reportedly there was a brief time where it looked like he could go 1st overall to the LA Lakers. But the Lakers ended up sticking with a big guard out of Michigan State. And the Bucks, who already had a solid backcourt, would scoop up the smaller Moncrief, who looked destined to be a star, with the pro comps that he was receiving for his play on both ends of the court. Milwaukee had been a solid team since Don Nelson took the helm a couple years earlier. But as the 80s began, the Bucks would become one of the NBA's premier teams, starting with this season, as they had a collection of great players, like the forward duo of Marcus Johnson and Junior Bridgman, as well as sweet shooting guard Brian Winters, as Moncrief would slot in as a high-effort player coming off the bench, giving relief minutes to Quinn Buckner, and doing exactly what he did at Arkansas in a smaller capacity, giving the team solid scoring, great rebounding, and tenacious defense. And as if he needed another advantage, Moncrief would have to learn how to use his hands more on defense. And although Moncrief had the worst shooting season of his career, he was just adjusting to a different league, while being used more as a traditional guard, spending less time below the hoop, and instead coming off screens for mid-range shots, which Moncrief would admit wasn't his game. But the team was playing well, sitting at 29-27 by the All-Star break, largely due to their great bench play. But during the break, they brought in some big reinforcements, in the form of one of the best big men the league had ever seen, in Bob Lanier, leading to the team going 20-6 over the rest of the season to finish at 49-33 and get a semi-finals matchup with Seattle. Moncrief had ended the season by hitting double figures in 6 of his final 7, so he was rewarded with a bigger role in the playoffs, and came out hot with 18 points and 9 rebounds in a 1-point Game 1 loss. Then in a Game 2 overtime win, he came up clutch, as he would score all 6 of Milwaukee's points in the overtime period. Then over the next 4 games, Moncrief would hit double figures 2 more times, and the Bucks would get out to a 3-2 series lead. But Bridgman was lost for the series in Game 5, and while Moncrief averaged 14 points and 5 rebounds over the final 2 games, Seattle would win both to take the series, as Moncrief's rookie year wrapped up with him averaging about 8.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 1.5 assists per game. Moncrief's rookie year had shown Nelson enough, as while Moncrief began the 81 season in a bench role, he was getting starter minutes, and would eventually get a starting spot in late November, as he continued to improve, and with a lot more freedom to play his game in Nelson's high-speed offense, Moncrief was again slashing through defenses for high-percentage looks, or coming out of nowhere for an easy putback, and with the ball in his hands more often, he was getting his teammates involved too, as his numbers went up across the board. And even in the NBA, the undersized wing was one of the league's most efficient offensive players, finishing with the league's highest offensive rating, as he was a big reason for Milwaukee being the league's second highest scoring team. And even if the offense wasn't there, Nelson knew that Moncrief was a defensive stopper. So when Nelson wanted someone shut down, he put Moncrief on them, leading to the Bucks also possessing one of the league's best defenses, as they would win 11 of their first 13, which included a 10-game win streak, and would keep the winning going throughout the season, as their 60 wins would be the second highest win total in the league. But their conference semifinals matchup would pit them against the 62-win 76ers. Moncrief would start the series with 10 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, 4 steals, and 3 blocks in Game 1, but Philly got the win, and the rest of the series would see Moncrief do his usual work, hitting double figures in all but one game, and relentlessly hitting the glass, while playing good defense on Sixers rookie Andrew Toney. And another series would go 7 games, with Moncrief putting up 19 points and draining 11 free throws in Game 7, but it would end in heartbreaking defeat, as Moncrief's season had seen him average about 14 points, 5 rebounds, and 3.5 assists per game. But Moncrief took the next step in his game going into the following season, as he would enter star status. Injuries would slow down Bridgman in 82, as he would miss half the season, which meant the team was without one of their top producers in many games. But even after some offseason knee surgery of his own, Moncrief would just take on the extra offensive responsibility, as he would not only become the team's leading scorer, but he would also lead the team in both assists and even rebounds, while shooting over 52% from the field, en route to his first All-Star selection and a second-team All-NBA selection, while even garnering some MVP consideration. So Moncrief was scoring like he never had before, dropping at least 20 points in 40 games, while maintaining a top 5 offensive rating, and still locking up his man on the other end, as he would be voted second-team All-Defense as well. And the Bucks continued as an Eastern Conference power, winning 12 games in a row at one point, but they stumbled into the playoffs, as although they finished with a 55-27 record, they had lost 4 of their final 5 games. But they had revenge on their mind when they matched up with Philly for the second straight year, and Moncrief looked serious with 23 points in Game 1, yet the Bucks lost a close one. Then with Moncrief going for just 9 points in Game 2, that definitely wasn't enough, as Milwaukee was in a 2-0 hole, and they were about to be down 3-0 if it wasn't for Moncrief banking in a shot at the buzzer to give Milwaukee their first win of the series in Game 3. But Milwaukee fell behind 3-1 after a 2 of 14 shooting performance from Moncrief in Game 4. Then after Moncrief dropped 20 to stave off elimination, he shot 3 of 11 in Game 6, and the Bucks again fell to the Sixers, as Moncrief's year ended with him averaging about 20 points, 6.5 rebounds, and 5 assists per game. And while Moncrief was without a doubt one of the league's top defenders, the NBA would introduce an award in 1983 that could solidify that title. The 1983 season would be the greatest of Sidney Moncrief's career, with Lanier aging and the Bucks bringing in another legendary, yet past his prime big man in Dave Cowens. Milwaukee would really slow down the pace, but Moncrief's quickness was still extremely effective in the half court, as he would routinely blow past defenders, leading to the highest scoring average of his career, to again lead the team, as he would even drop a career-high 42 points in a February 24th win over Houston. And Moncrief would again be voted an All-Star, while making his only appearance on the All-NBA first team, and he also made an appearance on the first team All-Defense. But beginning in this season, the league had also introduced an award for the top defensive player, and the inaugural winner of the DPOY would be Sidney Moncrief. And you might expect a DPOY winning guard to average more than 1.5 steals per game, but that was the beauty of Moncrief. He didn't have to take risks, as he stayed glued to the ball handler and rarely had defensive lapses, whether he was guarding his own man or switching onto someone else. Sure, he'd steal the ball if it was there, made evident by a career-high 7-steal performance in a December 5th loss to New Jersey, but like very few players, Sidney Moncrief could completely take his man out of the game, as there were times where it seemed like the Bucks were playing 5-on-4, with the way Moncrief's assignment was non-existent, which was a source of pride for Moncrief, seeing as how the players who got the recognition back then were often the big men, and he must have been doing something right to have guys like Larry Bird speak so highly of his defense. So with Moncrief anchoring the defense, the Bucks put together another 50-win season, as they finished at 51-31, and started another playoff run with a semifinals matchup against Larry Bird and the Boston Celtics. However, Bird was sick and banged up, which even caused him to miss Game 2, as this really helped Moncrief and the rest of the Bucks hold him to below 19 points on about 44% shooting. And on offense, Moncrief did everything, leading the team in scoring and assists, as he dropped at least 20 points in each game of the series. A series that was over much earlier than everyone expected, as Milwaukee would sweep Boston to advance to the conference finals and another series with Philly. Moncrief began this series with a 1 of 9 shooting performance, and while he greatly improved his play after that, the Bucks found themselves in a 3-0 hole, even though Moncrief was averaging 4 steals over the first 3 games. Then with a 17.9 rebound performance in Game 4, Moncrief and the Bucks avoided the sweep until they were dismissed by Philly a few nights later, after Moncrief fouled out. And while it was a disappointing end, they were also the only team to get a win against the Sixers in the '83 playoffs, as Moncrief's year ended with him averaging about 22.5 points, 6 rebounds, and 4 assists per game. The Bucks didn't look much different in '84, and Moncrief continued as the team's best all-around player, finishing top 2 on the team in scoring, rebounding, assists, and steals, en route to another All-Star selection and second-team All-NBA performance. And with some improving young players, like big man Alton Lister and swingman Paul Pressey, the Bucks' defense was even better, as they allowed the fewest points in the league. And it all started with Moncrief, as he made another appearance on the first-team All-Defense, and after becoming the first DPOY award winner, he also became the second when he repeated in '84, which was validation for Moncrief, as now he knew that he deserved it. Yet as the pace continued to slow, the Bucks became one of the league's lowest scoring teams. But with such a stingy defense, they still reached the 50-win mark, and finally got a different playoff opponent, as they would take on Atlanta in round 1. The series was going as expected, as Milwaukee took the first 2 games pretty convincingly, but then Atlanta came back and won both games at home. And all of a sudden, the Bucks were in a win-or-go-home situation heading back to Milwaukee. And up to this point, Moncrief had been playing incredibly, but he saved his best for last, as with an early exit staring them down, Moncrief went for 20 points on 7 of 10 shooting, while adding 10 rebounds, 8 assists, and 2 steals, in a Bucks blowout win, as he ended the series as the team leader in rebounds, assists, and steals, while shooting 60%. And next up for Milwaukee was a matchup with New Jersey. A 1 of 8 shooting performance from Moncrief in Game 1 saw New Jersey steal a game in Milwaukee, but to make up for it, Moncrief averaged 27 points on 63% shooting over the next 3, as the teams were tied after 4. But the Bucks would go on to wrap it up in 6 games, and were heading back to the conference finals for a date with Boston. Moncrief would play a really solid series, averaging about 17, 6, and 4, with 2.5 steals. But the Celtics and a healthy Larry Bird were just on another level, as they would jump out to a quick 3-0 lead until Milwaukee stayed afloat with a Game 4 win. But the Celtics wrapped it up a couple nights later, as Moncrief's season had ended with him averaging about 21 points, 6.5 rebounds, and 4.5 assists per game. However, while Milwaukee had made back-to-back conference finals appearances, they had seen their regular season win total drop in each of the past 4 seasons. So it seemed like they may have gone as far as they could with the roster they had, and Don Nelson decided to change things up going into the '85 season. With Lanier retiring, the Bucks needed inside scoring, and when an opportunity came to get younger and free up some cap space, Nelson pulled off one of the greatest robberies in NBA history, as he sent a package including Johnson and Bridgman to the Clippers, and in return received a package consisting of Terry Cummings, Craig Hodges, and Ricky Pierce. So now the Bucks had added another MVP candidate in Cummings, and when point guard Mike Dunleavy went down with a back injury early in the season, the shooting guard Hodges had to fill in the starting lineup, meaning Moncrief would shift to playing the point, while the rapidly improving Paul Pressey would also join the starting lineup. And just like that, Nelson had reloaded. So in Moncrief's first year playing the point, he finished with his highest assist total of his career. But luckily, he didn't have to exclusively play the point, as Pressey was a more than capable point forward, allowing for Moncrief to continue abusing defenses with his quick cuts for high percentage looks at the hoop, as he put up the second highest point total of his career. And as had become expected at this point, Moncrief would be voted to his 4th consecutive All-Star game, while earning second-team All-NBA and first-team All-Defense honors, and would finish second to Mark Eaton in DPOY voting. And for the first time in 5 years, the Bucks saw their win total increase, as they continued boasting the league's top defense. Yet with a much improved offense, they would finish with a 59-23 record, and a first-round matchup with a Bulls team featuring a rookie Michael Jordan. Game 1 was a great start for Moncrief, as he poured in a game-high 30 points, on 9 of 14 shooting. And after Jordan dropped 19 in the first half, Moncrief's defense, plus the Bucks double teaming, would limit him to just 4 second half points. And while Jordan would average over 29 for the series, he needed a lot of shots to reach that mark, as Moncrief made him work for every bucket. As Jordan would say later on, that Moncrief would completely hound you for 48 minutes. And while Terry Cummings was the Bucks' leading scorer in this series, Moncrief quietly put up 26.5 points on efficient shooting, while adding over 4 rebounds and 4 assists, as the Bucks wrapped up the series in 4. To advance to a second-round matchup with Philly, the Bucks would play well offensively, especially Moncrief, as he was again the team's second leading scorer at over 19 points per game on about 56% shooting, while also averaging over 5 assists. But their top-ranked defense was picked apart by the Sixers, who would shock the Bucks with a 4-game sweep, as Moncrief's year ended with him averaging about 21.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, and 5 assists per game. Milwaukee didn't really make any changes for the 86 season, but it didn't really look like they had to, with their trio of Moncrief, Cummings, and Pressey, along with Ricky Pierce off the bench. And 86 would see Moncrief retake his spot as the team's leading scorer and top defender, as he was once again a first-team All-Defense member, along with second-team All-NBA and an All-Star, while finishing top 3 in DPOY voting. And the Bucks had sped up the pace a little bit, and they were looking dangerous, now boasting a top 5 offense and defense, as they were stringing together win streak after win streak, almost matching their win total from last year, but coming up a little short at 57-25. But this was more than enough for a playoff berth, as they drew New Jersey in round 1, and everything was going well. Moncrief was producing well, and Milwaukee took the first 2 games with ease. But in Game 3, Moncrief suffered a strained foot, and while the Bucks still completed the sweep, there was now concern around how Moncrief's foot would hold up during their second-round series with Philly. And Moncrief would end up producing quite well when on the court, putting up an efficient 17 points and putting in his usual effort on defense. However, he wasn't always on the court, as he had to sit out games 1, 3, 5, and 6. But with the Bucks having won both games that Moncrief played in, leading up to Game 7, they were hoping that pattern could continue. And luckily it would, as Moncrief dropped 23 in Game 7, and the Bucks held on to win by 1, and advanced to the conference finals. So they had gotten through Philly, but now they had to get through Boston, and Moncrief was hurting, as he would miss Game 1, then have a poor performance in Game 2. However, he continued pushing, and over the next 2 games he would average over 25 points and 7 assists. But a Bucks team without one of their best players at full strength couldn't hold up, as they were swept, with Moncrief's season seeing him average about 20 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 5 assists per game. Unfortunately, his injury-filled postseason was foreshadowing for what would become of Sidney Moncrief's career. Moncrief and the Bucks began the season as normal, and had even bolstered their front line with the addition of Jack Sikma. But after a disappointing start to the year, Moncrief went down in late November with knee soreness. Then after returning in late December, he injured his hamstring and didn't return to full-time action until mid-February, and didn't look like the same Sidney Moncrief once he came back, as his knee continued to hinder him and eventually led to Don Nelson bringing him off the bench for the final month of the season. But the Bucks still won 50 games and got a first-round matchup with Philly. But as the playoffs went on, Moncrief looked more and more like himself, coming off the bench for the first 2 games before returning to the starting lineup for Game 3, as he would act as Milwaukee's second leading scorer in the series. And while the teams exchanged wins over the first 4, the final win would go to Milwaukee, as they outlasted the Sixers at home and advanced to another series with the Boston Celtics. It wouldn't be a sweep this year, but it was looking like it would still be over quickly, as Milwaukee fell behind 3-1, with Moncrief struggling over the first 4. But then he turned it up in Game 5 in Boston, with 33, 5, and 4 to extend the series. Then back in Milwaukee, he finished with 34, 6, and 4, along with 3 steals. And the emotions were running high, as after Moncrief got fed up by one too many Danny Ainge elbows, he slammed Ainge after a hard foul, leading to a fine, but luckily no suspension, as the Bucks won, and it was anyone's series heading into Game 7. But Moncrief's magic ran out, as with his knee bothering him, he went 2 for 10 from the field, and the Bucks lost. with Moncrief's season ending with him averaging about 12 points, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists per game. The Bucks had one big difference going into '88, as Nelson had resigned and Del Harris would fill the vacant coaching position. And while Moncrief would appear in 19 more games than last year, he got a late start due to off-season knee surgery and still missed significant time through the year, never at 100% due to his knees. As a degenerative knee condition that was apparently supposed to limit him to just 2 professional seasons was finally taking its toll as he neared a decade in the league. So Moncrief remained a starter, but wasn't a focal point like he once was. But his leadership, effort, and IQ still made him valuable to a team who for the first time in years wasn't looked at as a contender after finishing with a 42-40 record. But they would still get a playoff matchup with the Atlanta Hawks, and Moncrief would play well, hitting double figures in 4 games, and even having back-to-back games with over 20 points. But he was limited to just 24 minutes of action in Game 5, as the Hawks knocked out the Bucks, and Moncrief's year ended with him averaging about 11 points, 3 rebounds, and 3.5 assists per game. Moncrief looked a little healthier in '89, playing his most games in 3 years, while remaining in primarily a starting role. And with the Bucks fielding a deep rotation, Moncrief was able to conserve himself more throughout the regular season, in preparation for another playoff run, as the Bucks had improved from last year, finishing 1 win short of 50 wins, and getting a first-round rematch with the Hawks. But offensively, this was a series to forget for Moncrief, but he was still able to contribute defensively on the Hawks' Reggie Theus, as Milwaukee outlasted Atlanta to set up a second-round matchup with Detroit. But Moncrief just couldn't do what he once could, and would see his minutes drop in this series. But the Pistons shut down everyone en route to a 4-game sweep, as Moncrief's year ended with him averaging about 12 points, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists per game. Moncrief likely would have continued playing, but due to his knees, the Bucks weren't willing to offer him a new deal. And with a 32-year-old Moncrief feeling that he wouldn't be in high demand, he instead announced his retirement after 10 seasons. But after sitting out a year, Moncrief was offered an assistant coaching job with the Hawks. Yet he felt that if he were a coach, he'd be projecting himself on the court. So instead, he made his comeback as a player, stating that his knee issues were never career-ending. He was just burnt out from basketball, as he would join a Dominique Wilkins and Kevin Willis-led Hawks team, appearing in 72 games this season. And while his minutes were low and his production was limited, it was still encouraging to see Moncrief out on the court nearly every night for a Hawks team who finished with a 43-39 record and got a first-round matchup with Detroit. And for the most part, Moncrief was quiet, except with the Hawks facing elimination in Game 4, when Moncrief gave one last great performance by scoring 22 points off the bench in a Hawks win, before Detroit wrapped it up a few nights later, as Moncrief's comeback year had ended with him averaging about 4.5 points, 2 rebounds, and 1.5 assists per game. And after the season, Moncrief retired for good, after the Hawks unexpectedly renounced his rights. But still, he could leave the game more on his own terms. And even though he didn't want to be a coach back then, he would find success in coaching in his later years, then eventually transition into private business. And while it took some time, he was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2019. Like a lot of great players who end up forgotten over time, Sidney Moncrief did nothing to bring attention to himself. He just played his heart out every single time he touched the floor. One of the greatest defenders ever, who doesn't get as much recognition due to his game not being predicated on forcing turnovers. He just stopped people from scoring, exactly as a defender should. But he was just as deadly on offense, as someone who could contribute in many ways. His Milwaukee Bucks days, and those teams as a whole, have the misfortune of being overshadowed by the Celtics and Sixers stranglehold over the Eastern Conference throughout the 80s. But Sidney Moncrief was the heart and the glue of some pretty incredible Bucks teams. And when you think of guys who could completely change a game without even touching the ball, Sidney Moncrief is near the top of that list. But that's it for today's episode on Sidney Moncrief. Hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. If you liked it, check out this one on one of his Bucks teammates, or this one on another Arkansas alum. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.